In just about 6 weeks, the New York Jets and every other club in the NFL will gather for the NFL draft, and we are here tonight, myself and Dylan Terman, for our mock draft 1.0. I'm Glenn Naughton with JetNation Radio and JetNation.com. Be sure to log into JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. Dylan, how you doing? As I've said on previous shows, we tend not to do 25 mock drafts a year. I know they're fun, but if by the time the draft rolls around, you've mocked every single guy in the draft to the Jets, what the hell is the point of a mock draft?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I think normally on average, Jet Nation, maybe 2, 3 at the very most if we get antsy during the cycle. That's not to say we're not playing around with the mock draft simulator behind the scenes. It's just you propose so many situations, it starts getting a little diluted here, and we start going down crazy paths where we're trading down 15 times. We have 27 draft picks, and you and I make sure we get every single person we love. So to avoid all that and just talk about maybe a couple of the guys that we love, we're going to present our first mock drafts. You have one, I have one. No trades, which I think is cool because we'll explore maybe a trade scenario closer to the draft once we have more pieces. But coming out of the combine, I mean, you feel like you have a better picture of what these guys could be as prospects, and the painting starts to become a little bit more clearer. You start to see it better. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm pumped for it. I've been playing around with these. I just wrapped up the mock I was gonna do. I kicked around like, do we do one trade? Allow one trade? Which closer to the time we'll do a mock with trades, and we know that what we have today is going to change, but this is a chance to grab some players we like and explain why we like them and why we think they would be good fits for the Jets. So without further ado, let's just kick it off and get rolling. We know free agency is in next week, and we know some of the holes on the roster will hopefully be filled. And a lot of the needs that exist today may not exist come draft time. And then we'll switch things up. But as of now, what we know, going off of that, we're gonna do a mock 1.0. So I'll kick it off, Dylan. No mystery here for me. I think I've made it clear for probably most of this year. My favorite player in this draft, who I think would be a really good fit for the Jets, fills a need. An elite player. All I had to do was hope he would be there, and he was. I'm going with Tetairoa McMillan, the Arizona wide receiver. I think he is one of one in this class. I know some people are freaking out that he's not running the 40, which I kind of understand. You do want to see that, but I mean, I've watched him play football, and he runs fast like a lot of football players do. He might not run a 4.3, or he might run a 4. He might run on the high 4.5s. But, I look at a big-bodied guy like Anquan Boldin, who famously ran like a 4.7 and ended up being a damn good NFL wide receiver. Listen, those guys are exceptions, and I don't think he's going to run a 4.7. But, and listen, if he does, I'll probably change that pick. I'm not going to project him to go 7th overall if he's running in that range. But if he's in the mid-high 4.5s, given his height, wingspan, I have no problem taking. Look, listen, I know it's fun to have guys who run, it's fun to have a bunch of track stars, but you also just have to have guys who can catch the football and create mismatches, and that's what he allows you to do.
Yeah, I think probably the A1 wide receiver complement to Garrett Wilson in this draft, just based on his size profile and what he does from an athletic standpoint too, also complements Garrett well. His route running prowess is still a little bit higher than somebody who you would expect at the size that he is. So I think that's a cool element of his game. And I think that's something that's trending more in today's offense is wide receivers that are still tall have been going to these 7-on-7 camps for 12 years at this point. So like these guys are route runners at like the truest form. And even the tall guys, like we'll get into like Jaden Higgins eventually, but I like him in like the second round. And he's another one of those tall guys who just moves really well. So yeah, Tetairoa McMillan, to me, he's kind of been sliding down my power rankings of players I would take at 7, assuming all the guys that I love are there. But I can't argue with the pick. Absolutely not. I went offense as well. I didn't go Tetairoa, but I couldn't argue with that at all. With that being said, I went offense, like I said, a different way of pass catcher. Maybe one that's more of the traditional path, I guess, so to speak, because a lot of people are mocking him to the Jets. But I felt like for the first mock, I wanted to present a realistic scenario that also blends with players at positions that I like. And I feel like the Jets are going to have to double up at tight end. So I went with the 7th overall pick and I took Tyler Warren. You can call him a 6th offensive lineman. You can call him a wide tight end. You could call him your F and your move tight end. Like, he can do it really all for you. I think it was Daniel Jeremiah who said the running back room is going to love him. The quarterback room is going to love him. So you're just going to find a very high floor in Tyler Warren. And although I look for the high ceiling players, and I think McMillan is more of a high ceiling player than a high floor player to me, I feel like, trying to be realistic, Tyler Warren fits a need at a high floor where maybe we'll call it safe. And I don't know if safe is the way they want to play this draft, but I just feel like you can't go wrong with what Warren brings to the table.
Yeah, and it's worth noting, I've mentioned this before, but anyone watching, listening who hasn't heard or didn't hear the comment, Rick Spielman, of course, the Jets advisor now, did say on one of his shows leading up to the Senior Bowl that Warren had reached a point where he viewed him as being worth using a top 10 pick on, or saying he thought he would be a top 10 pick, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that you have a prominent voice in the room who feels that way, it's sort of inches you a little closer to at least the possibility of taking a tight end that early on, because while some people may object to it, the Jets are in no position to not take a guy who can help them a great deal early on. I think Daniel Jeremiah mocked him to the Jets, I believe, and as similar to what you've said, he gives you an extra offensive lineman and a pass catcher, versatile guy, can be a gadget guy, throws the football well, for a position player. I think he played quarterback in high school, if I'm not mistaken. But he, I've seen him on a few trick plays that Penn State runs, and he can throw the football as a gadget guy. So he brings a lot to the offense, and a throwback guy. So a popular pick there. I know that a lot of folks have either mocked that already or sorry, I know a lot of folks have mocked it, and a lot of fans have talked about that, about approving that, that selection. I stuck on the offensive side of the ball again with my second pick. This was, it's not that it isn't. I mean, it's a need, and I feel like it's great value. I went with Minnesota offensive tackle Ariante Ursary. He's a guy that I thought would be a first round pick. I've seen him go in the first round in some mocks, but I feel for sure he's a top 50 player. If he goes outside of the top 50, I'd be shocked. If he goes in the first round, I would not be surprised at all. But in this particular mock, he was sitting there at 42, so I grabbed him. He's a absolute brick wall. He played on the left side for Minnesota. He'll have a full offseason to get acclimated, a full preseason, training camp to move over to the right side. I don't see why he can't make that move. I think that he's going to be a guy that's an immediate upgrade at tackle. But, again, we're talking about these possibilities, Dylan. If the Jets, say hypothetically, I saw they gave, signed off on Morgan Moses as being healthy. If they convince him to stay, that changes everything. And now maybe you're not taking a tackle that early.
Sure.
You're still taking a tackle, but maybe not that early. But for me, I'm going with Ursary at 42.
Yeah, it's funny. We talked before we did the show, trades, no trades. So I made one of each while I was waiting for your answer. And in the one where I traded down from 42, I was able to still get Ariante Ursary. So I'm glad that in the one that I did no trades, I didn't take Ursary, but I did use him on the cover page. If you're looking on YouTube, I used Ariante Ursary on the cover because I had a feeling you were going to take him. So I'm very happy that at least one of us did, because I almost did as well. I went a different direction. So they told me that my pick of Ariante Ursary on PFF was a bad pick, or not the best pick. And they said to take Darian Porter, the cornerback from Iowa State. So in the mock that I did with no trades, I stayed put. Baltimore actually traded up with me to take Trey Amos in that first scenario. So I said, let me look at the cornerbacks that were available at 42, because while I think cornerback 2 is probably going to go to an in-house or a B-tier free agent, I wanted to see who was still there. Savon Revel was there at 44 or 42. So I said, coming off the ACL at ECU, it's a little bit of a risk, but you have to swing premium positions with premium picks. I think Aaron Glenn is going to load up in that secondary. We see safety being the popular name for free agents, and I think that's where you should attack that market. But you need a replacement for DJ Reed that you want to feel comfortable about. And if they don't want the prospect of Eccles or Stiggers or JBC as cornerback 2 to start the season, you can at least have Savon Revel coming off the injury, rehabbing, getting healthy, and then competing in a couple months. So although it is a risky pick, he was on trajectory to be in the conversation for cornerback 1 during the season when he tore his ACL. So unfortunate injury for him, but I don't think it's one that's going to be a huge detriment to his career. And if we can steal him here after being drafted, slotted as a mid-first to late first round pick right before the injury, I think this is a good scenario for him to fall to us.
Yeah, not a bad option there. I think that I'd have a hard time arguing with that one. It takes care of a critical spot for them.
Mm-hmm.
Up next is pick number 92. Big drop, free fall from 42 to 92. That Raiders pick, or that Raiders trade lands them that pick for Devontae. Went in the direction here. A guy, again, guys are going to fall. Some guys are just going to be flat out wrong on where you think they're going to go. I went with Jordan Birch. Got myself an edge rusher. I feel like this is a really deep edge class. I feel like there are other years where he would be a guy you would say top 50. 6'6", really long, holds up well at the point, disruptive as a pass rusher. I feel like the Jets need help up front. Obviously, you're a year removed from Huff. You brought in Reddick, who is an absolute bust. So now you've gone from being sort of embarrassingly wealthy at the edge spot a couple of years ago to now you're like, well, you got JJ coming off an injury, so you don't know what you're going to get there. You've lost Huff. Reddick stunk. You've got, of course, Will McDonald, who had a big year. But you got to have more than basically. You say you got 1.5. You got McDonald and you got JJ, who's a question mark. So you need an edge rusher. Give me the tall, lanky, not lanky, but rangy, long edge rusher out of Oregon in Jordan Birch.
Yeah, I'm just looking at his measurables here. I haven't gotten into his tape. I got into his teammates, Jamari Caldwell, but not his. And I'm seeing just 6'4", 279 pounds was his combine weigh-in. He's one of Feldman's freaks, so that just kind of points to his athleticism. Ran a 4.67, which guys in the 250, 260 range were running 4.67 at the combine. So you can't hate on the athleticism there. And I guess just looking at those measurables specifically, you would assume as an edge player, he could even be like more of the JFM or Michael Clemens replacement even. Like we're probably going to cut Clemens. So I think Birch would be a nice slide fill in. And as a third round pick, you're expecting something from him within the first 2 years. So why not just add him into the rotation of guys? He's your third guy up, maybe even fourth guy up, depending on free agency. So can't complain with attacking the trenches with that pick. I attacked the trenches with my pick at 92. The opposite trenches, however, and I went with tackle, maybe / guard Wyatt Milam from West Virginia. I'm kind of banking a lot of stock into the Penn State game where he did very, very well against Abdul Carter. Thought he had like a so-so Senior Bowl performance while I was there. Not a ton of, wow reps that he won, but a couple of reps that he lost. But in the third round, like I said, a guy you can expect production from in the first 2 years, whether it's at tackle competing for the Morgan Moses replacement, or you bring back Morgan Moses and he's your swing tackle who can be better than Carter Warren or Max Mitchell potentially. And if he does have guard versatility and he can slide inside, obviously if an injury happens, that just makes him that much more valuable to me. So I attacked the offensive trenches because I feel like that's where a lot of our young talent needs to start with. I think you can get a little bit older on defense and have a solid unit, but this day and age, you need young offensive players. So give me the versatile offensive lineman from West Virginia.
All right. He's a guy that really early on, it was like he was getting a lot of love as
first round almost. Yeah.
As a first round tackle.
Mm-hmm.
So he's dropped a bit there, of course.
Yeah. And I think that goes to explain the whole process of this is very fluid. And also these mock draft simulators are very fluid. As you saw, probably the heavy users of these simulators, there was a big shift after the combine. So we have to understand, that these are probably individualized rankings on most of these sites that's just put into a list. So you have to, my preferred option is to make my own board on PFF and do a couple rounds and really understand where guys that I see fit going in second and third round picks. But it's tough because everybody's like, oh, well, I was able to get a quarterback in round 5, so he's got to be there in real life. And that's not always the case. He's probably gone in round 3 in most drafts. So just
Yeah.
an interesting note about the mock drafts. It's not the Bible.
Yeah. I think that so many times I do a mock, and before I'm even done with it, or as soon as I complete it, I look at it and I go, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done. I should have done this differently. Should have done that differently. And this time was no different. And again, like I said, this is a chance to throw some names out there of guys we like, guys who would fill needs that would fit. And this is a player I like a lot. Don't get me wrong. And I've said the Jets should double up at this position in this draft. Well, not should, but I've said, look, I've said edge, I've said DT, I've said tight end, double up at one of those at least. It doesn't have to be DT, but there are so many tight ends and you don't have one. There are so many DTs and you've only got one. There's a ton of edge and you can never have enough of those. So given the depth, go attack that position. I went DT here with a guy who I really like in Joshua Farmer, but looking at the way my whole draft played out, I'm like, that should have been probably the best offensive playmaker on the board, and I could have gotten a DT or two later on after that. Love the player, though. Great size. He can be a true nose. He can be a run stuffer. He would help this defense. His size, his wingspan in the middle of that D next to Quinnen Williams. And let's face it, this defense got gouged on the ground last year, and they're going to need to add some run stuffers, some DTs up front, and a guy who can penetrate a little bit and get into the backfield. As Big Sarge says here in the chat, right? Eagles Super Bowl champions. Yes, they were. And a big reason for that was the way they were built on the interior. I was surprised, Dylan. I wrote an article a few weeks ago about it, and a lot of people on the forums on JetNation were like, oh, great, multiple DTs. That's throwing picks away on more defensive linemen. I'm like, did you guys not watch the Super Bowl? Do you not see what happens when you're able to collapse the pocket and harass the quarterback consistently from the inside? So by all means, grab a couple of them. I grabbed Farmer here. Like I said, pair him with Quinnen Williams. He's one of the bigger guys in this class. He's one of those guys that I liked a lot last year and hadn't watched him again this year till about 2 weeks ago, maybe. And I'm just watching him, explode into the backfield and rip, pull running backs to the ground. And I'm just like, I forgot how good this DT class is insane. And it's like there's so many of them, and he's one of them, and he's right up there on the list for me. So that's what I did. I'm fortifying that interior defensive line in the mold of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, I'm starting to really like what you're doing on the defensive trenches here, because Farmer is another player to me that I loved coming out of Senior Bowl. 6'3", 305. Another Feldman freak. I know you don't necessarily look at that stuff, but that's just funny that
I look at it early in the year, but it's never a part of my would I pick this guy?
I just check a box in my database just to see, because he projects a lot of people's combine stats, or like what he's hearing from their colleges, and I just like to see how they measure up compared to what they actually do. So that's interesting. I did like Farmer a lot. This is where my mock draft kind of takes a little bit of a turn. If we were, asking the chat to grade ours, you'd probably receive a better grade, because I'm going quarterback. We don't know what they're going to do in free agency. I don't necessarily want a bidding war for Justin Fields as much as he would be my preferred candidate. I'm not, getting into a war with the Steelers or somebody else who wants him and paying 12, 14, 16 million for a 1 to 2 year player for Fields. I'm not interested in doing that. So if they are able to land Fields on a cheap deal, I still think they need a quarterback for the future. So I went with my guy, Will Howard. He was still there at 109. I'm not going to take the chance of trying to risk a round 5 pick. I don't even think, honestly, that Will Howard's going to be there at 109. There's a really good chance that a lot of these guys that we view as third-round picks outside the consensus of the NFL, they're probably going a lot in the second round. And Jalen Milroe could still even be a first-round pick just based on his traits. So although the quarterback, speculation is all over the place, I'm going to go and kind of use the mock draft in my favor, like I was just talking about before. I knew a quarterback was going to fall to 109. It was just a matter if it was going to be him or Milrow or McCord who fell, and my choice was between him and McCord, and I felt like this was the better pick. So Will Howard, to me, mental toughness, physical toughness, he's a winner, all the things that Aaron Glenn is looking for in the spot, and maybe he can do something for us and be the future.
All right. And that he's, there's a lot of quarterbacks right now where it's like, where does this guy go? These guys that are getting the hype. You think back to last year, right? Who was it? The kid out of Tulane who was getting all the hype, and he ends up going late day 3. You can't even think
He
of his
went in the
name now.
7th round to the
Michael
Packers.
Pratt.
Michael Pratt.
Yeah, Pratt goes late. Spencer Rattler was getting some hype. We were high on him. He ends up going soon. So all these guys, you're like, oh, he's a quarterback and he's getting hot. He might be a top 100 guy, and they go, day 3. So you just don't know. Now listen, Will Howard's a much different story. College football playoffs, played lights out, won a national championship, completed 72% of his passes. He can run the ball. There's a lot of stuff he can do. So that's I think that if he's there, I don't have any problem at all with that pick. But where does he's one of the interesting ones, because what does a national championship do for your stock?
Mm-hmm.
How many people say, well, it's a Chip Kelly offense and he just has guys running around wide open all over the place and blah 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 blah. But he wasn't a bad player at K-State. He didn't play like he did at Ohio State.
Yeah, people think that his
talent
K-State stuff is like just throwaway. Like, oh, K-State is such a bad school. I'm like, I don't know. He was doing well. Like, I've only watched a couple games of all 22 from that year, from his last year. Was it 2023? But it's like, I don't know. You see the things that kind of transferred over to Ohio State, and then you just see him in a more sophisticated offense, I guess is the way to put it, with Ohio State. Obviously, you're surrounded by better talent, but he's the type of guy that he lets the talent take over. He takes that check down to Quinshon Judkins and lets Judkins go with it. So like, that's not his fault. He's just doing what he's letting his playmakers play. I thought it was interesting. Kurt Warner did tweet that he had the best 4-game sample size of any of the quarterbacks.
I saw that. You tweeted. That's why you retweeted that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the playoff run that he's talking about. And I haven't gotten to that part of the film with Howard yet. I'm still in the beginning season stages, like middle season of his, like probably 6 or 7 games of the 13 that he played. You got to remember, when they played to the championship, they're playing like 16 games. So I'm trying to get the whole season sample size of him, and haven't got there yet. But if it's only getting better, I already like what I see. So,
all right. Staying on the defensive side of the ball for me, and I don't know if you remember, Dylan, I believe it was late in the season. It may have even been very early in the offseason. And look, it's not like we need somebody who covers the team or an insider or anything to tell us. We all saw how bad the defense was last year. And Rich Cimini said on his podcast, expect a full rebuild of this defense. Like they need and they do. They need multiple DTs. They need multiple safeties. They need at least one corner. Linebacker, what's going to happen? I mean, the talk that Sherwood may come back, surprising to me. Fine, he's a good player. I just expected Aaron Glenn to pursue at least one bigger linebacker who would see a lot of time. But if you bring Sherwood back, you have 2 lighter guys in him and Williams. So we'll see what happens there. But bottom line, you need linebacker help. You need safety help. You need a lot of DT and a lot of safety help. You need some corner help. So I know fans love the big playmaking, exciting, speedsters and the sexy picks. Might not be a sexy pick, but it's a guy who fills a need. And I'm taking a safety. I'm taking Alabama's Malachi Moore. This is a guy with tons of experience. Obviously, you're playing in a major conference. You're playing in a ton of big games. He's a guy who makes a lot of big plays. He plays well deep down the field as a center fielder. That's the type of thing the Jets need, because they've lacked that for quite a while now. And Aaron Glenn, you think back to that clip from Hard Knocks, and I've talked about this before, right? This is something at some point, I don't know why I lost sight of it, but I used to, oftentimes when I was looking at prospects, I would put a lot of value on guys who had an entire college career and only lost 3 games. Like these are guys who expect to win. When you get your guys from Alabama, Ohio State, these monster programs where they lose 1 or 2 games a year, they just show up and expect to win. So I think we're going to see Aaron Glenn grab a few guys from those schools, and Malachi Moore is the guy that I'm grabbing here. Give yourself a good safety from a major programs, played a lot of big time games, and played at a high level, and something the Jets obviously are in dire need of.
So I'm not making this comparison because they played at the same school, but because of what he did for Aaron Glenn's former team, I see a lot of Brian Branch type
Brian Branch. Yeah.
role for Malachi Moore. And I understand they paid Michael Carter II as like, a top slot guy, but that doesn't preclude you from going to get a versatile defensive secondary piece in Brian Branch. Like what's to say you can't have Sauce, um, Michael Carter II, a cornerback 2, and Malachi Moore in like a dime package look or, something of that. So Malachi Moore is one that I know he slides in mock drafts, and I don't want to again take advantage of the mock and take him in the 7th round. So I think this is more realistic to where he goes. I don't know if you used PFF or a different site, but on
Yeah,
PFF
I
he's
use
almost
PFN.
PFN. Yeah, so in PFF at 206, he's almost always there, or 187, whatever the
Really?
second to last pick is. And I'm like, this seems a lot like further down than I would even think for him. And I'm not saying he's a Brian Branch level type guy, but that's the type of role you would see for him in the NFL. And Aaron Glenn would be the guy to use him in the right way, I would assume. So I like Malachi Moore. You pair him with a taller safety in free agency, and you really just reconstruct that back end and make it what it once was a couple years back. All right. I'm up at 146. Let me pull it back up on my phone. I forgot I had it all saved on my phone, not on my computer. Okay, yes, this is where I doubled up. We talked about doubling up at a couple positions. You mentioned defensive interior. The tight end was the one that I mentioned at the top. You have to double up. And I know Tyler Warren has the blocking ability. Obviously, he's still a great pass catcher. So I went with somebody who has more of a background in blocking and not so much in catching. And I went Jackson Hawes from Georgia Tech. He's a very I don't want to say interesting prospect because it's more of like a cliche word, but he's such an unknown in the pass game to me that he's like Ruckert in a way. So I think he has higher upside in the blocking game for sure. He's a little bit heavier than Ruckert as well. I don't think Ruckert was 250, right? He might have been a little slender. So Hawes is 6'4", 250, Senior Bowl guy. He had a pretty crazy combine, 10 and an inch broad, 34 and a half vert. He didn't do so well in the bench press, which is funny. Being a blocking tight end, you would assume that that's where he would excel bench pressing guys because that's what he does on film. But I don't know. You pair him with Tyler Warren, you have a really good 12 personnel package. I expect this team to be a very run heavy team, and my mock draft is kind of reflecting that with 2 tight ends, tackle / guard, and a quarterback who can run an RPO style system.
All right, not a bad pick. Look, you want a guy like that on your team. He's a guy who plays with the right attitude. He's physical, and you get a guy as you said. Warren obviously is a guy who helps your run game as a blocker. You get him and Hawes in 2 tight end sets, and you're going to be able to run the hell out of the ball. And given the fact the Jets don't really have a quarterback on their roster right now, I know you've got Tyrod Taylor, but you can't count on him to stay healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So chances are you're going to bring in a less than stellar veteran to go along with a rookie not named Cam Ward or Shador Sanders. I think you're going to have basically a developmental quarterback working with Tyrod Taylor and another, fringe veteran. So if you want to win some football games, you're going to have to run the hell out of the ball, and adding those 2 guys helps you do that.
Yeah, I keep saying 2.5 quarterbacks is the over-under for starters this season. And if you become the run-heavy team, you can avoid heavy quarterback injury at the position because they're not taking shots, dropping back in the pocket all the time. So although the offensive line, I'm sure, would love to pass protect more than they'd love to run block, they make their money in the run game just as much too. And I think we have the horses up front to really help with that. So tight end was the downside for sure. I don't want to see Brandon Bates clips anymore.
I could see and I've said it a million times before, 2 tight ends is almost a must, really. You don't have a tight end on the roster.
No.
You might have guys under contract. You might have some guys under contract, but nobody who's proven they can catch a football. So that's the issue. On I'm up again, and I'm going defense again, and I'm staying in the trenches,
Hell
and
yeah.
I'm going with one of my guys. I believe I did a thread on JetNation leading up to the Senior Bowl. And we do this every year. Sometimes we tweet it out. My guys heading into and we'll have a my guys thread as the draft approaches. But one of my guys, Jamari Caldwell, the DT out of Oregon, guy's an absolute monster. Between him, Farmer, and Quinnen, you are going to be stout up front. You're going to be able to consistently shut down opposing run games. You're going to be able to apply pressure, collapse the pocket. Caldwell, I think he weighed in the 330s at the combine. He was listed at 340 ahead of the Senior Bowl. This is a guy that moves like a guy who weighs 315. I was watching. I think I was tuning in to watch either Birch or Harmon. Caldwell was an afterthought to me, and this is several weeks ago. And I just see him moving laterally, like cutting off running lanes and getting stops at the line of scrimmage, and just thinking to myself, how deep is this Oregon D line, and who the hell is this guy? He's been phenomenal. Sorry, there we go. Almost lost power there. So Jamari Caldwell, and you're good to go on your defensive line, at least on the defensive interior for the foreseeable future.
This is USDA Grade A beef brought to you by Glenn Naughton in this mock draft, because this defensive line is now looking back to form and scary once again. Jamari Caldwell, 5.16 40-yard dash at 332 pounds. All right, just for comparison, Yaya Black from Iowa weighs 336 pounds, and he ran it at 5.39. So almost 0.25 seconds slower than Caldwell at the same weight. And then you look at the guy that you picked just before him at Joshua Farmer, who ran a 4.11. So just a tick faster, 0.05 seconds, but at 305. So Jamari's given up 30 pounds to him, is running the same speed. So Jamari Caldwell is one of those dudes that is crazy fast for his size, crazy athletic. I was very impressed with him at the Senior Bowl. The little bit I watched on tape, like I mentioned before, just having a really killer process. And I think to get him in the 5th round would be an absolute steal. So I like all the defensive linemen that you're bringing. I kind of neglected the defensive line now that I'm looking at my draft, because I have 3 picks left, and there's only 1 defensive lineman on there, whereas you have at least 4 already. So I'm a little bit behind you there. With 158, I had to go secondary. I went with Savone Revel before at pick 42. This time I came back around and got Caleb Ransaw. To me, this is just a RAS score type of pick, not saying that the Jets or, Dare Moose, you're going to, fall in love with the RAS score guys like Joe Douglas did. But once you get down to this portion of the draft, you start kind of, you don't know as much about these players as you wish. So a Senior Bowl guy, so I've seen him physically play. I thought his combine was great, 4.33, 10 3/4 inch broad jump, 10 foot 9 inch broad jump, 40 inch vertical, 16 bench reps at 225, which was second highest, only behind Upton Stout of Western Kentucky. So just a really explosive athlete who had himself a good combine week. The only interesting thing was PFF had him rated as a safety, and the combine had him running and competing with the corners. So I don't know if this is like a versatile guy. I have to look at his PFF splits where he played in college, but it's to the Malachi Moore point. Like, if you have a guy who can do multiple things on your back end, you're playing 5 of these guys most of the time. So sometimes if you want to play 6, I feel like this would be a perfect slot in, and 5th to 7th round picks are all the same in my opinion. So to get a guy who has the athletic upside and runs a 4.33, why not?
All right. In this spot, for me, I'm going to you got to take one. I'm taking a quarterback. I'm taking a guy who I don't think is getting enough attention. And to be honest, he didn't have a great year this year, and he even fell off my radar for a little bit. But he's someone I watched a lot of last year because I liked a lot of his teammates, and a lot of those guys a couple of those guys are coming out this year, and I like them. But I'm going with Mizzou quarterback Brady Cook. Here's a guy, we've talked about how Aaron Glenn is supposedly looking for a quarterback who can make plays with his legs. And not just, there's guys who can do it well enough to just pick you up 7 or 8 yards when there's some open field in front of them, and then there's guys who can run, pick up big plays, extend plays to make big throws. That's something you see from Brady Cook. He played in the SEC, so obviously he's played high level competition. He's played at a high level. He's played through injuries. A guy that I really like. I think if you can get him on day 3, here he is again, using his legs, escapes pressure against Georgia, gets out of the pocket, heaves it down the field for a big gain. These are the types of plays that quarterbacks have to be able to make in today's game. And Brady Cook, when I watch him, I think will he even be there at this point? But again, going off of last year and all these guys who we thought would go earlier than they did, I'm hoping Brady Cook is there that late. If the Jets like him enough, I have no problem with them taking him a little bit earlier. But it was between him and Tyler Shuck, he was one of my guys in the JetNation, the Senior Bowl thread I started. And I've watched more of him since the Senior Bowl, and he's only looked better. Like, in full disclosure, when I had him as one of my guys, I'd only watched a couple of his games, but I was really impressed. And I thought, man, this guy's got something about him that, I really like. And then I cooled on him a little bit because of the injuries. There is a significant history there. I get that. But the more I watch of him, like this guy, the perfect ball placement. Like, guys don't have to break stride. They just, throws. He makes throws that previous Jets quarterbacks make it look like the hardest thing in the world, and he's just flicking the ball and dropping it right where it needs to be, dropping it in the bucket. So it was between him and Cook. I went with Cook because Cook's a little bit younger, doesn't have the extensive injury history that Chuck has, and I think he's got the bigger arm. But I think either one, if you can get them on day 3, well, I don't know if Shook now, he's getting talk as like QB3. So we'll see about that. But I went with Cook in that spot, and I would gladly do that.
Yeah, so I did this research a couple weeks ago about all the combine quarterbacks and how they fit the Parcells needs in terms of senior, graduate, 30-plus starts, 23-plus wins, 2-to-1 TD ratio, 60% or more completions. And Brady Cook clearly checks all those boxes. Obviously, I think you and I both agree that some of these need to be more modernized in terms of, the turnover ratio and the completion percentage, and graduates probably here nor there at this point, because a lot of guys, they come out and then
guys just don't graduate anymore.
That were like, we've seen it, even like Quinn Williams, he went back to school and graduated his first offseason after, his rookie year, because if you don't graduate in time, like that process, like you don't stop to sleep almost from the end of your college season to the end of your rookie season. It feels like it's just a whirlwind. So a lot of those guys graduate late, but Brady Cook clearly checks all the boxes. Not saying that that's what they're going to prioritize, but I think that's interesting. And you mentioned Shuck with the ball placement and everything. It's crazy how high he is rising up boards, and it's not a bad thing. I think he's, a very capable quarterback, but we're talking about a guy who participated in football games in 2018 in college. That's crazy to me. Like
it is. It's crazy. I guess I'm not saying I'm not saying you're wrong, because that does make you go, oh my God.
Yeah.
And I guess if he busts, then you can look back and say, oh, we knew that and you still took him. But there is the part of me that goes, well, maybe he's a little bit more mature than some of these younger guys, and maybe. All right, so let's say you draft him and he gives you 9 years of good play instead of 14. Like, would I complain about that as a Jets fan? I've never had more than 1 year of good play out of a quarterback. Like, if a guy's going to step in and be, maybe he's ready to play a little sooner. Maybe you don't worry about him making some of the mistakes off the field that some of the younger guys might make. So there is something to be said for that. But I won't say it's no concern. But like I said, watching him throw the football, and the number of throws that the receivers just puts his arms out, ball just drops right in, whether it's a swing out of the backfield or a deep shot down the field. The guy does some really good things. I wasn't watching the combine coverage live. I went back and watched some of it, and all the tweets while he was throwing, because since I couldn't watch, I had stuff going on that day. I'm just on Twitter constantly, and everyone's tweeting like the best looking quarterback out there throwing the football. Not universally, but I would say the majority of people whose takes I saw said he looked better than any. Some people said Dart looked the best. but just him being in that conversation and then watching the game film, you can see why people were impressed with the way he throws the ball.
Yeah, I think Shuck has had the best draft process from start to finish, in my opinion. Good Senior Bowl coupled with a good combine. And not to say combine means everything, but it's a good thing when you perform well on the field, and then everything that comes out after that is not negative. Like the negative stuff would come from the meetings and the interviews with the teams, because truthfully, like the guy who had the worst combine of the quarterback group, in my opinion, was Will Howard. And people want to just say, "Oh, he's trash. The gig is up. You know, it's over for Will. He's a bust." I need to remind people that JJ McCarthy had a really bad combine last year, and a lot of people didn't view him as a first round pick. Not to say
It's just
Will is,
I
but
think
things
it's
change. Like it's very fluid with the quarterback discourse. And just because a guy doesn't have the best day one day, like we're talking about national champion here. So like there's got to be things that he put out that got him there, you know? So I just don't put too much stock in what they do in their shorts and throwing to receivers they've never thrown to on like 6 hours of sleep in a foreign, place that they're not used to. So it's a weird circumstance, but I don't put too much stock in the throwing. But
I can't believe it. I can't believe the amount of stock that people put in these workouts.
yeah. It's
The guy won a national championship while completing 72% of his passes. But
yeah.
because he was playing catch with some guys he never met before, he's exposed.
Right.
Give
And
me a break.
realistically, all you're looking for in those drills is, do they get the proper drop back, 3, 5, 7 step, take one hitch and throw the ball. Doesn't always have to be the most perfectly accurate pass. It's more the footwork and the timing that they're trying to understand. Like you said, these are guys they've never thrown to before. Guy could be running a little faster than the third guy in line, and the timing is just a little weird. So it's a lot of stock to put into it. That's why we always revert back to film is king, and we're always going to, hang our hat on that. And that's what we like to watch. So, Will Howard could have the best pro day. And I don't think, it changes my opinion of him. I don't think it would change if Jackson Dart lit it up at his pro day in the rain, not wearing a glove with no towel on, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
The stuff doesn't change, but it is,
It does
important.
become, we get over the top with this stuff sometimes.
With the
The way
quarterback
some of the stuff gets put under,
specifically,
yes.
yeah.
The stuff that gets put under a microscope is just it's beyond insane. I can't believe that watching guys throw against air could sway your opinion of how well he's going to play a football game.
Mm-hmm.
When you're okay, let's discard him playing football and let's focus on the time he played catch with some strangers and it didn't go so well.
Right, exactly.
That whatever.
Yep. And that's quarterbacks every year. They're always going to everybody's going to cling to their guy. But
yes.
All right. So you have Brady Cook at 107. That makes me up with my first of 2 6th-round picks. I went with another guy who might have versatility. I do think he's more of a right tackle only based on the film that I watched. There's no experience of him playing inside at guard. But Emory Jones Jr., another Senior Bowl guy, a guy that I thought his film wasn't entirely impressive, but the one thing I will hang my hat on with Emory Jones is the physicality, the play through the whistle, that I'm not going to take shit mentality. You're trying to take my lunch money while I'm trying to take your lunch money. He does not like to get beat. Sometimes that leads to mental errors. He'll lunge in pass pro if him and the defensive player are in a little bit of a chess match. There are mental errors, I think, that come along with his game, but he has that dog mentality where he'll bounce somebody out of the club and he'll pancake you. And I think those are the traits to me with a day 3 offensive lineman, that you can coach up the technique, the footwork, the hand placement, the stuff like that. I don't know if you remember this from watching the LSU offensive linemen. They stand like their feet are this far apart. They're not like shoulder width or a little bit wider than shoulder. It feels like they're so tight split with their tackles specifically that it's hard to get a sense of like what their real pass pro footwork would look like if they had a wider stance and he was able to really kick out those 3 steps in pass pro. So interesting case study with Emory Jones. I didn't love him compared to obviously Will Campbell and Miles Frazier. I think has had a good process where I would take him as well over Emory Jones, but neither of those guys were there on the board, and Emory Jones was. So maybe he's a versatile piece. If not, he's a tackle only, and I think we need those too. So I doubled up at offensive line with Milam earlier on in the draft, and now I got Emory Jones Jr. from LSU.
I think he was one of those guys. I think Jones and was it Sayavana, the Arizona kid?
Yeah.
Both Spielman and Ryan Wilson talked about how they worked at guard at the Senior Bowl, and they thought they looked way better at guard.
Oh, good, because I didn't see him play guard, but I was hoping
Yeah.
that he would because I didn't love the right tackle on day 2, I think, when I watched him.
Yeah, and they both said they looked okay at tackle, but once they kicked inside, they looked like they could be dominant at guard.
Oh, perfect.
Both of them. So somebody like that would be somebody who gives you that little bit of versatility. You know, I love that.
Mhm.
Although Frazier is an absolute monster.
I
You
love
want that
Frazier.
guy on your team any day. Real quick in the chat, let's see. Danger Zone says, do you think Membu's meteoric rise from his combine performance is legit or recency bias? I swear I heard his name 500 times this week and 5 times last week. So talk to me. Okay, no. I don't think it's just because of the combine performance. He is another guy. So I say all the time, right? JetNation forums, best Jets forums on the web. But we have just a draft forum. Where it's only talk, it's year-round talk about draft prospects. Now, I don't want to, I try not to flood that forum with my thoughts on 5,000 different players and just completely take over the forum. So I will, a handful of times a year, maybe a dozen times a year, I'll start a thread on a guy and just say, you know, Alabama, safety, whatever. I'll just put the school, the position, the player, and I'll put a couple highlights in there and 1 or 2 sentences on my thoughts. A few weeks ago was the first time I watched Membu, and I started a thread on him. And now keep in mind, I'd never watched him before.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't heard anyone talk about him. So I'm watching him thinking he's like sort of an unknown. Like, this guy's not getting any love. And I'm watching him, I'm thinking, this guy's really good. Like, and I started a thread on him. I'm like, this guy, like, if he's there at the top of round 2, I'm taking this guy. No question.
Yeah, for sure.
And then someone who's more familiar with him jumps in and says, dude, this guy's a first-round pick. I said, all right, well, I'm going to watch some more, and I'll see. I watched 2 or 3 more games. I went back in the JetNation forums. I was like, this dude is 100% a first-round talent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I thought top of round 2 when I'd watch a couple of games, and that was based on the fact I'd not heard of him before. And I thought, well, this guy isn't a hot prospect, but I'd take him in the top 50. And then this is going to be the funny part. I've mentioned the Spielman podcast a few times. His co-host Ryan Wilson weeks ago, I actually tagged Ryan Wilson in a couple tweets laughing about it. A few weeks ago, Ryan Wilson, they were doing one of their mocks or player profiles, whatever, and Ryan Wilson said, Rick, I've been watching this a lot of this Membu kid. I think this guy's a top 12 pick. And Spielman was like almost offended. He's not going top 12. He's not. He's too short. He's 6'3". There's no 6'3" tackles in the league. And Ryan Wilson, on the defensive, like, all right, Rick, this is what I saw. I thought he's a good player. I would take him at 12. Mm-hmm. And so Spielman almost kind of mocking him. And I'm listening to this going, I could see top 15, like maybe not 12, but 15, absolutely. So in my mind, a few weeks ago, pre-combine, I was saying first rounder. A couple weeks ago, or, a week and a half, whatever, I'm saying top 15. And now after this combine, I'm like, he could go top 10. Like, it could happen. So
could you see a world where he goes higher than Campbell?
Yeah, after Campbell's measurements came in, absolutely.
I think
Campbell came in not a very good wingspan. He came in with a guard wingspan. So I absolutely think that, I'm not saying it will, but that wouldn't surprise me at all.
Like Membu at 4. Like if it goes Cam Ward, Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, Armand Membu, I don't think anybody would be surprised.
No, and I don't. Nobody at this point. Nobody would be surprised. So there's your answer, Dane. And Dylan, I don't know how much you've watched him or what your thoughts are, but this is not recency bias combine. This is, again, me, guy who had never seen him before, watching him about a month ago or whatever it was, and saying this dude's good, and then watching a little more and saying this dude's really good, and then he blows the combine out of the water, and it's like, okay, well, this guy just solidified himself, not just a first rounder, but top 15 is very attainable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know Spielman said 6'3" tackles, and that's probably what he
Yeah,
was
he measured at
projected at.
6'4".
He measured in at 6'4" and a
Yeah.
quarter. So, plus 33.5-inch arms, 82-inch wingspan, running a sub 5, jumping 34 inches, 31 bench reps. Yeah, this is not
Was it a sub?
a
I thought it did. Well, I mean, I thought I saw
491. He ran
501.
a 491.
Oh wow, wow! I must
Yeah,
have been.
yeah, he ran a
I thought it was a 501
491.
for some reason.
Yeah, so his times, his measures, his everything were really impressive, and I don't think it's recency bias. There was a lot of talk
Mm-mm.
coming out of Senior Bowl about him. I thought him and Marcus Bowe, the Purdue guy, they were like
Yeah,
pretty, hot there. They were hot names. I think I was talking to maybe it was Connor Rogers, maybe it was somebody else about Membu, and he's been a big Membu guy and has gotten even heavier on his support for him. But even back at the Senior Bowl, I picked his brain about him, and you just have nothing bad to say about him. And maybe the height was the concern, and I feel like he checked that box where he's not a small tackle anymore, and he's a very long tackle, obviously. So I don't think it's a flash in the pan type of thing. I think you do see premium positions get vaulted up boards, come closer to the draft, and I mean that's a big part of it. But I think the film is just it's too nice. Like if he's not there at 7, I'm not surprised.
yeah, and apparently, speaking of Connor, Danger Zone saying here, or Dane saying that the Badlands guys. Oh no, that's Connor Rogers isn't bad. Connor Rogers
Yeah, he's Badlands with Joe. Yep,
is he?
that's their
Okay,
crew.
okay,
Yeah, so
that's
yeah, if
right.
they're pushing
That's
him at
right.
7, then yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't even know if he'll get there at this point, but yeah, if he's there at 7, he's well in the conversation.
Yeah. So yeah, there's your answer. It's not recency bias. Really, really good football player.
Absolutely.
Where are
We
we
got
at?
one more pick. We got one more pick each.
All right. Let me see real quick.
Pick 208.
Yeah. I thought I took 2 tight ends. Took 1 tight end. Iowa tight end Luke Lashy. Guy that I've liked for a few years now. And he's one of those dudes that just similar, and I'm not saying he's the same player, just saying same school, same position.
Mm-hmm.
I like George Kittle coming out, but his production wasn't great. Iowa just traditionally doesn't put up big numbers on offense. Iowa offensive players don't do much. Kittle didn't do a lot. Lashy didn't do a lot. I've seen him mocked at 150. I just pulled up. I found a PFN 7-round mock a couple weeks ago and just saved it to my favorites. Stuff will change, but just to get an idea where people are projecting some of these guys, they had him going 216 to the Browns. I looked that up after I picked, so that's right in the range. I took him at 209. They have him going at 216, but he's 6'5", big dude, solid blocker. I haven't watched him this year in terms of his blocking, but I know in years past I thought he was good, could be better, but definitely all around guy, can catch it, can block a little, tough guy, and fills a need. And if you can get him on day 7, I would like to get another guy earlier on. That probably, again, that Joshua Farmer pick, I don't not like the player, obviously. But this is actually, I think I said to you, Dylan, even though we agreed to no trade downs or no trades, I said, like, they got to trade down at some point because they need 2 tight ends, or they need too much to not move down. I think they will. So we'll see what happens there. What are your thoughts drafting Starks at 7 and a tight end in the 2nd round? What do you think of that, Dylan? Colin wants to know in the chat.
Starks at 7 is an interesting one to me, just because I think that there will be players at premium positions that are worth taking over Starks at 7. You can't hate the player. I mean, we talked about Malachi Moore, and I feel like Starks is like a 10 times better version of that, and he plays a lot more outside. He wears number 24, and when he made that backwards, like lunging backwards interception, it felt very Revis-like, and you get those vibes back. But I don't know if I love safety at 7. Tight end in the 2nd round, hell yeah, I would love that. I mean, I don't know who's projected at the 42 range, but usually like Elijah Arroyo. If Loveland happened to fall,
I was going to say if Loveland falls, Fannin, if they view him as a tight
Fannin
end,
is another good call out. Yeah, absolutely. So I don't hate the strategy, but Starks, I guess, would be not really the guy that I love. And yeah, Dom C puts it into perspective. Too much
Exactly.
capital for non-premiums, and that's what I think.
Yeah.
Rounds 1, 2, 3, you should be trying to take as much premium talent as you can because you're going to expect something from them right away, if not within the first 2 seasons of their career. So don't hate it, don't love it. Starks, tight end in the
Yes,
second
I'll
round, I
tell
can
you
get
what.
on
Ever
board.
since the Jamal Adams, Marcus May thing, I'm like, you better be healthy Malik Hooker if you want me to take you that early. You better be a guy who can cover 3/4 of the field from the
Yeah,
time the ball leaves the quarterback's hand, widthwise, of course, not the lengthwise. But you better be able to cover 3/4 of the field from the time the ball leaves the quarterback's hands to where you intercept it, 50 yards in the other direction,
yeah.
40 yards in the other direction, because that you got to be able to do that. I'm not, especially top 10. First round is one thing. Top 10 on another safety, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah. And Colin follows up by saying we passed on Hamilton when we picked Sauce and Garrett. Yeah, and you could probably find I don't know if we were on YouTube at that point. I think we were. I said it was Alex at the time. Him and I were doing a mock draft, and I said go get Sauce and Kyle Hamilton at 4 and 10 respectively because you need players who are built in a lab. And clearly, we came to find out how little they prioritize the safety position in the former regime, and Kyle Hamilton was probably not even on their draft board at that point, and he slides to the mid-teens, and he ends up having a really good career in Baltimore. But those were the two guys I said in my very first mock draft that season. I was like, go get Sauce, go get Kyle Hamilton, because these guys are built in a lab with their size and physicality profile that it's unmatched. And then, obviously, I mean, I probably had us trading for every superstar wide receiver under the sun in 2022, so that's why I didn't take Garrett, but I think I'm still happy with the way it turned out for the Jets.
Yeah, yeah. As much as everybody's down on Sauce, I think he's going to have a lot of people eating their words
Yeah.
next
People
offseason,
calling
and
it
everyone's going to pretend they loved them all along.
yeah. The people that call him Ahmad now and say he has to earn Sauce back. I'm like, come on,
Stop it,
guys. Like, this is
idiots!
silly.
Give me a friggin' break.
All right.
Earn
Rounding
your
out my
nickname.
yeah. Come on.
So dumb.
Rounding out my draft, I'm picking another guy, high RAS score. I finally did it. I attacked the trenches on the defensive side of the ball. I'm really starting to, like you said, regret this first one. So we're definitely going to have to do better in our second one. Ty Robinson from Nebraska, the
Love
defensive
that guy.
tackle. Yeah, and
Yes.
like this is a player that maybe he's not available where PFF is mocking him. I just kind of went with the board at the later rounds because these are guys I clearly have less notes on. But again, another guy, just an all-around RAS
Just the
performer. Like
DT class is just crazy. It's crazy.
it's so nuts, dude.
I
Like
think
what
this is
was
the
it?
deepest I've ever seen.
Yeah,
I can't recall a
24.
DT class like this.
What was the stat that Jeremiah said about him like having
Oh
like
yeah,
so many
he
grades?
said he had starter grades. He said this time last year I had 12 defensive tackle with starting grades. This year so far I have 24.
Yeah, and I'm sure
Starters. Not
if I looked at the
like high
board,
level backups or
yeah.
like day 3 quality backup. 24 starting tackles in this draft. And dude, like I said, I kind of forgot about Joshua Farmer till I watched him the other day and I'm like,
Yeah,
Jesus, like there's so many of them. And
they fall through the cracks. Yeah,
yeah. And then forget
100%.
about it. When I see a guy I haven't seen or a guy I haven't watched or heard of yet and he's looking good, I'm like, I don't have time to start looking at DT 37 because they're all
Yeah,
just it's crazy. It's
yes,
I mean, if you need a DT, man, this is the year for you.
yeah.
And this is why I'm hoping we see some trade downs and I can't remember we talked, Dylan. I know I mentioned it when I did a solo show. But looking at Spielman's history, almost
Yeah,
always has double
I love
digit
that show.
picks,
Yeah, you did. Yep,
wheels and deals.
10+ picks in almost every draft he had up
Yep,
until Sean Payton came. Yeah,
yep.
that's a really important to note. And I don't know if you like consumed the combine. I know you said you were working for parts of it. They showed the Jets suite for like a couple seconds, and it was Mooj and Glenn, and then it was Spielman and Robbie Payton. So those are the 4 guys that we can assume publicly, visually, are the
Yeah,
decision makers in this process right now. So, not saying it's all a 25% split and everybody's vote is weighted
right. Yeah,
equally, but
it's Muji and
Spielman is
they're
part of
advising.
those
Yeah,
1/4 of those people talking. So, whether they rely on him a ton or they just want, a surface level analysis of him, like he's part of the process. And I think that's really interesting because we have a lot of potentially good minds in Mooj and Peyton and even Glenn from his scouting background. And then you have the proven guy with Spielman. So how much do they rely on his experience and tutelage to get them through this process? But again, Ty Robinson, 6'5", 288, just combine monster. He jumped out of the gym, 33.5-inch vertical, was pretty solid for 288 freaking pounds. A 4.5 short shuttle, again, at his size is pretty not unheard of, but pretty fast considering the people in his weight class. And again, I took guys with high RAS scores, high athletic grades based on not as much film watched on them. And Ty Robinson, I'm sure, is one of those top 24 tackles that DJ was talking about.
Let's see here what we got on him. I got a bunch of his highlights because I'm a big fan.
Oh, you got Senior Bowl clips. This is great. Yeah.
I think he was right DT here, I think.
Yeah, he's, blown by the left tackle or left guard.
Leaves the lineman. Yeah, okay, that's one of the Senior Bowl clips. That's right.
Yep.
What else? See if I got something else.
That was a quick get off too. He really, the guy had no chance to put his hands on him. That was great. I mean, it's a hard reach block for the tackle, but that was explosive get off still. And that's the stuff that, like, that's what wins you football games. When you happen to have that right, bull rush or pass rush move as they're doing the far reach blocks, like that's the chess moves of football. So that's really, really cool to see.
See if we can excuse me. See if we find one more on him before we wrap up. Looks like run stop at the line of scrimmage. Oh, is Senior Bowl again? Yeah.
No, that doesn't look like
no, it's not. So I don't have my glasses on, and my
that's
eyes
Ohio State. Yeah, just kind of sifting through the BS and getting to it. Working against the right guard.
Yep.
Stacking shed and just find the ball carrier.
He's a guy again. It's like I feel like over the past few weeks,
point of attack to let Quinnen win. That's the type of stuff that you need.
Yep, and that's enough with this the makeshift D tackle situation around Quinnen that we've dealt with for a few years. It worked a couple years ago when you had Jefferson and Al Woods and those guys worked out well, but they were a little older. You let them leave in free agency. You trade JFM, which I said at the time was one of my least favorite moves they made. Time to rebuild that line. I knew I was leaving someone out when I was talking about getting to the quarterback, and JFM plays a little inside and a little outside. So I was naming Huff and Reddick as guys you lost, but you lost JFM. You look at this D line from 2 years ago, 3 years ago to now. Now you got to replenish it. You got to restock it. Fidarian Mathis is going to be interesting though. I feel like I got to go back and watch some of him because he was a surprise guy who became available sort of out of the blue. So we'll see what happens, guys. We'll roll out of here. We're just over the 1 hour mark. I gotta head to London in about 6 hours, so I gotta get some sleep. And we will be back soon. We got to work something out with a full free agency show that starts in a few days. Mm-hmm. If you can't join Dylan, maybe I'll hop on Sunday or Monday and do. When does it kick off?
It's Monday at 4 p.m. I think opens the tampering period. So we can go live either Sunday or Monday right before it goes live, and then if any breaking news happens right in the first couple minutes, we can at least break that down.
Yeah, let's see if we can do Sunday. We'll try to work that out because I definitely won't be working.
Yeah.
Not working Sunday, home all day. Let's see if we can get together and do that and
perfect.
Share some thoughts. So that'll wrap this one up. Thanks for joining us, folks. That is Mock Draft 1.0 JetNation Radio 2025. Have a good one, Jets fans.